It's not off, it's on dream. What is on want to do? She's making oh God, you guys do not allow me.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
sir.
So,
Good afternoon, sir.
yeah, so kick off. It's 1:46, I guess. Exactly 1:45. Well, I think we can start. We have looked at theory of revenue. We have looked at theory of cost. And this afternoon, we are looking at theory of production. By the way, did you receive the additional notes I sent to your class on theory of cost? Did you receive those additional notes? Did you? Hello, class. Did you receive those notes?
Not really. Not really.
Not really. It's on your platform, or your class rep confirmed to me that they sent it to your platform. Please read.
Yes, sir. It's on our Telegram,
Read.
sir.
Okay. It's there, please.
Theory of cost, marginal costing, cost behavior, budgeting and budgetary control.
Yes, please. Because we didn't have, I wanted to use it on Saturday when we had your class, but because of the confusion in terms of
Pardon.
I don't think lecturer is still here.
His network logged him out, so let's wait for him.
Oh. And it's like this Zoom meeting has a limit participant of 92. So he may not be able to join again unless somebody goes out.
We'll still be able to join. We just have 92 people here, and the minimum Zoom meeting is 100 or 300. So we still have 92 people here.
I doubt it. Sometimes not up to 100. Doubt. But let's see.
Just give me that, please. Mina, your account name is what? No, as in the account name. Okay, okay.
Yes. Sorry, class. Are we back again?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sorry about that.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I'm actually in DLI just to see that we have reliable network, but it seems as if the network is somehow here. Anyway, let's see how far we can go very quickly. So this afternoon we are looking at theory of production. Theory of production. And in this lecture, we'll be looking at the definition of production functions, distinguish between production timeframes, evaluate laws of production, and apply the principles to real-life case studies within the Nigerian economy. Now, let's look at production in the Nigerian economic context. We all know, well, just in case you don't know, well, I don't want to assume. Our economy is majorly dominated by the oil and gas sector in terms of FX revenue. And next is agriculture, And next is services. I'm talking of the banking sector, telecom sector, and the fintech. We're looking at companies like MoneyPoint, what is it called again? OPay, etc., etc. Those are structured large manufacturing sectors of the economy. Now let's look at the small and middle scale enterprises. And this sector dominates more or less small businesses. They dominate the Nigerian economy. And they account for about 96%. So 84% of what's it called? The economy in terms of employment generation. Well, they are prone to short-run fixed input constraints like electricity, capital, access to machinery, etc. and etc. So, for example, what this means is that SMEs, let me just use the Amoria's business as an example. For those of you who have ate there before, Amoria's place is a small business. It's a small restaurant. And it employs not less than, I think, defined by the employment of about maybe 5 people to 20 people. That is the definition of a small scale. Actually, when we look at the new tax act, and for a medium scale enterprise, I think it's about maybe 5 to 50. But if you look around you, most of the businesses you will see are small businesses. So from that standpoint, they dominate the Nigerian economy. Now, let's look at production functions using input-output relationships and their technical efficiencies. For those of you who did economics in your maybe GC or SSC, we know the factors of production are land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Your land include, well, the land that we stand on. For example, the land that you build your factory on, the land that you use for agriculture. And this also includes the resources under the ground, mineral resources. And for example, land, all these game reserves, though they are land, but they are classified as land. In addition to the mineral resource, the wealth of resources on the ground. For labor, we all know labor can be skilled or unskilled. And when you work for a business, what you get in return is your wages or salaries. But again, labor can be defined in terms of how skilled or unskilled they are. If we look at the structure of the Nigerian economy, well, the last population census told us that the Nigerian economy is dominated by a youthful population. I think the stratification of that census, I think it said about maybe 60 to 70% of our population are below the age of 30. And that tells you that we have a huge pool of people who are active in the employment market. For some economies, you have people who are aging very fast, they live very long, but well, conversely, they don't make too much babies. And when they get married, they just maybe have one or two kids, and then that's the end of it. In our own case here, the average family has about maybe 4. And then if you go up north, you have people having about 20, 30, 40 children, etc. But, well, like I said, it depends on how skilled or highly skilled they are. And then you have entrepreneurship. This is a managerial skill, how you manage your business, the operational effectiveness, the skills that you bring into it to promote the business and contribute to economic development. Let's move further down a little bit. let's look at the production function formula. This is the general production. When we meet physically, we shall look at this in full, in detail. But this is just to set the background for our number crunching as usual. So it's the general production function is defined by Q equals to FL into K. So your Q is your output, that is the total volume of goods or services produced within a given period. It could be in terms of metric tons. Let us say you have a cassava farm. Every cassava is measured in terms of metric tons. The F is the functional relationship, which represents the level of technology and managerial effectiveness. The L and K is the quantities of labor and capital employed as key variables or fixed factors. When we meet physically, we shall define this properly and solve questions on them. Now let's look at production isoquants. This is a basic graph of production isoquants. You have labor here, and you have capital. An isoquant is a curve showing all technical combinations of inputs, that is labor, capital, that yield the same level of total output. It is convex to the origin. The higher isoquant, that is the Q2, and then Q2 and the Q1. Let me go there again. The Q2 and the Q1 represent higher output levels achieved by increasing inputs, and they do not intersect. The two isoquants can never cross each other without violating economic logic. They cannot cross each other because if you look at, well, we are okay, where you are students of business admin, you are not doing microeconomic theory. If you are doing macroeconomic theory, this graph is defined and discussed in detail in that course. But don't let me take you too far into it. But this is just the isoquant characteristics. Now let's look at a case study. We are assuming, of course, for well, I'm not sure there is a white person in your class. At some point in time, everybody has eaten eba or drank gari, and we know the raw material for gari and eba is cassava. And for those of you who come from Abeokuta or Ogun State, you lafun. And then I think fufu, yes. I think fufu is made from cassava, yes, that's fine. So all of us are used to this life-saving crop, which is a root crop. And now let us assume you have this farm in a place called Ogun State. And for you to have or to grow cassava, you need land. If you do not have the resources to buy land, you can lease the land. You can lease it from the owner of the land, or you can lease it from a community. You can lease it from even the state. The state can lease land to you. But I think if a state will lease land, it will probably be in the range of about maybe 10 to 25 years, so that whatever you put on it can mature properly. And then you also have labor inputs. If you plant, let me say 1 acre. If you do 2 acres, the only time you will need extensive labor is at the clearing stage. You clear the you clear the farm, and then you plant. Cassava is such that it can thrive even in the dry season. If the level of rainfall is not very much, it can still thrive, except if there is no water at all for probably maybe many months. So the output of whatever you get, I think cassava, you can harvest cassava in between 10 to 12 months, I think. So in this case, let us look at the output. Having planted cassava, and then you are harvesting in about 10 months to 12 months. So the production function maps how additional hired labor increases total cassava yield in metric tons per hectare. I'm assuming you planted 2 hectares. If after you have planted the cassava, let us say in month 1, and then of course you have to tend to it until it starts to grow on its own properly, and for it to get farm into the ground. Thereafter, except if there's no rainfall, that is when you need enough farm hands to say you want to start to water it. If you have 2 hectares and then you employ 20 people, I can bet you at the end of the day, by the time you will harvest the cassava, after a year, whatever you are going to sell the cassava for may not necessarily, because you'll be paying the farm hands every month. And then let us assume that they are paying them minimum wage of 70,000. That is 70 times 20. How much are you going to sell the cassava after 12 months? So you have to, as a business person or as a farmer, know the relationship between how many labor hands that you're going to employ vis-a-vis how much you're going to sell your produce at the end of the farming season by the time you harvest your crop. Because your MR must equal to your MC. If your MR equals your MC, that means you have reached a break-even point. So, but your marginal revenue, if your marginal revenue is much, much higher than your marginal cost, it means, well, you are on a good pedestal. Now, let's look at returns to scale. Returns to scale. Here, we are looking at increasing returns, constant returns, and decreasing returns to scale. Now, increasing returns to scale, doubling all inputs leads to more than double the output volume. For constant returns to scale, it means doubling all inputs leads to exact proportional doubling of inputs. And decreasing returns to scale means doubling all inputs that leads to double the output of your output level. For example, we know what if you double your inputs, for example, let us use Yamoria as a case study. Yamoria is a small business. If Yamoria sells rice, and well, you have different types of rice that she sells. You have white rice, you have white rice and beans, you have fried rice, you have jollof, and then at the back, she sells amala and gbegiri, and then she sells pounded yam. What else does she sell? I think she sells fufu. What else again? I don't know. Now, doubling all inputs leads to more than double the output volume. In other words, if Yamoria buys maybe 1 bag of elubo, 1 bag of elubo flour, and then I would use a technical word. If she cooks and processes the flour, and then the way she sells, I don't know, this is peculiar to women, the way she will be wrapping the thing. And then, of course, she has to know how much she bought the bag of flour for and how much she has to sell by the time the final product is ready. So the input is the flour, water, gas, labor, what else again? Some level of fixed costs. So those inputs, they have to be computed appropriately. At the end of the day, by the time she sells, she must make sure that the takings that she will get from that 1 bag flour will probably double the cost of the inputs that she's putting into the manufacture or processing of the amala, so to say. But again, here, if there is double, if the input gives her double what she puts in, that means there's increasing returns to scale. Here, if the returns is proportional, it means, of course, this is more or less like she has, what's it called, a break-even point here. But here, if there's a decrease, it means she's running at what? She's running at a loss. Using the scenario I just painted to you. This is just using a layman's language to explain this. Now let's move further down. Let's look at short-run production. We're looking at fixed costs, fixed factors, variable inputs, and the law of diminishing returns. I'm very sure we have not forgotten our O-level economics, the law of diminishing returns. We are looking at short-run production dynamics, fixed versus variable inputs. I'm very sure you have done, well, casting your mind back to what we did on Saturday. We looked at fixed cost, variable cost. Well, if you flip it a little bit, that will give you fixed inputs and variable what? Inputs. The fixed inputs are characterized as factory size, for example, baking ovens, heavy machinery, leased lands. Then your variable inputs are what? Your raw materials, your labor. Sometimes you can say they are temporary. For example, electric power supply. Well, in this case, electric power supply is not particularly stable again. So you now have people using solar. But what as a person, what I do not understand, I'm still trying to investigate, is if solar, what's it called? Solar grid, maybe the solar grid can power, what's it called? Factory machines. I'm not sure yet. I'm still asking if it is possible, if solar can run a factory, but I doubt it. Now, again, let's look at the key production indicators. We have total product, average product, marginal product. Well, if you were in the class last week, Saturday, and if you have gone through the slides I gave you, as well as the additional notes I sent to your class, this should not be a problem for you to understand. For example, you have total cost, you have average cost, you have marginal cost. So if you just suppose this means your total product means your overall quantity of output produced. Your average product is output per unit. And then your marginal product is the extra input from one additional labor, one additional worker. These have their own distinct formulas. By the time we meet next week, maybe whenever, we shall look at them in detail and solve additional questions using quantitative examples, because I like quants as a person. Let's look at law of variable proportions. Now, stage one, increasing returns, diminishing returns, and what? Negative returns. Where your MP rises and your total production increases rapidly. This means the fixed capital is underutilized, hardened labor increases specialization and efficiency. Where you have diminishing returns, where your MP declines, but remains positive. That means your total production rises at a decreasing rate. And this is the rational economic stage for production. Where you have negative returns is where your MP becomes negative. That is, your TP actively declines. Overcrowded workers disrupt workflow and reduce output. In other words, if you have too much staff compared to your level of activity or your level of production or your level of output, if you have too much labor, you are going to... I'll just give you an example to explain this. During my school days, during my university days, I used to work part-time in one store. It's not here, it's outside the country. So usually they do recruit a lot of people around November, maybe towards the end of October, November, and December for the Christmas sales. And then in fact, they need a lot of people for Christmas work. And then those people can still be retained till mid-January. But towards the end of January, when people have spent their money for Christmas, whatever, and then people will just be expecting money to come in towards the end of January. In fact, when money comes in January, sometimes people used to pay, of course, that is when you have to pay school fees. You have to probably pay rent, etc., etc. So their sales decline a lot. At that stage, people that they recruited in October, November, and possibly December will not match the level of activity on the shop floor. In other words, they have too much labor to their level of sales. That way, if probably they recruited people to work till about maybe end of February, they will now be asking people to say, okay, well, we ask you to do maybe 30 hours a week, but it seems as if our sales is very low. You'll now be doing maybe 15 hours a week. So that is more or less trying to manage the labor cost vis-a-vis their sales level. Otherwise, they will run at a serious loss. This is where you have, if care is not taken, where you have too much labor vis-a-vis your level of activity, this is where you have negative returns. Now let's look at the TP, AP, and MT curves. Now, the mathematical relationships between these curves, where you have your MP is greater than your AP, your MP equal to your AP, when your MP is equal to 0 and your MP is less than 0. So these, they have stages, stages 1, stages 2, stages 3. Where your MP, initially your MP will rise, then gradually it falls down. And then at stage 2, your AP, well, it will rise, but it will be below the MP and the TP before it starts to decline. And of course, you have your TP, which rises above, and then at some point, it starts to fall, but not as rapidly as your AP and your MP. Now let's look at this case study of a tailoring shop. I'm very sure a lot of women, besides having their normal jobs, they like to learn tailoring. They like to learn fashion design so that they can sew their clothes themselves. Because sewing, going to a tailoring shop, to talking of a proper fashion designer to design your clothes or to sew clothes for you can cost them a lot of money. So some of them sometimes prefer to learn this thing. Now let's look at a small tailoring shop.
It's not pay money. It's not pay money.
Please mute your microphone or that person. Kindly mute your microphone, please. You have please, can that person mute your microphone, please?
If you know how to, like mommy now, if you know how to sew very, very well professionally, you should go to where they're saying they'll be paying her to sew for them. But yeah, so if you want to learn now, if you want to teach anybody now, you collect money. Mommy teach me.
Please, who is that person that wants to learn sewing? Please, you can learn sewing, but let us finish the lecture first, please. Mute your microphone, please. You have crowding in a small space, in a small tailoring shop. As a tailor, well, a small shop, I don't know, maybe 12, is it not 12 inches or 12 feet, by the way, normal shop. But it depends on how big the shop is. These machines, some of them are electric and some of them are manual. For a small tailoring shop or for a small fashion designer that starts with one shop or one machine, you have one machine, you have a cutting table, and all the gadgets, etc., that you will need to sew people's clothes. Now, let us assume, for those of you who know Java very well, maybe if you come to around Tejosho area, there are a lot of shops tailoring shops there. And then there are a lot of what's it called? Shops that also sell garments. So some of these tailors, it's a matter of just walking across the road to buy these garments from those who sell. It could be retail, wholesale, etc. Let us assume this let us assume this woman in this our slide operates with a fixed floor space and 4 sewing machines. And in adding tailors initially increases outputs rapidly as you have specialization. However, adding 8 tailors to 4 machines leads to idle waiting time, physical crowding, and falling marginal output. In other words, you have 4 machines inside the shop. Ideally, if you have 4 people to maybe 1 person each to 1 machine, and then maybe you have one additional hand that what's it called? That irons the clothes after they had been sewn, and then probably that maybe puts on your generator, do one or two other things. If you have 4 machines, you have 5 people. Well, at that rate, you probably break even properly and make more profit. But if you have 4 machines and then you have 10 people inside one shop, forget about it. You will have a lot of people. You have maybe probably about half of them standing, doing nothing. I do. In management accounting, it has a name. I wouldn't want to go into all that. So this is a typical production of a small business. If you have too much labor, forget. So your MR, you discover that your MR, your marginal revenue will be less. So your marginal revenue will be less than your marginal cost. Straight and simple. We have used the Amoria's restaurant as a case study. We can also use this as a case study. This brings the what's it called? The lecture to a pedestrian level. Some of these things are things that we see around us, but because we just see them, but we are not able to place proper economic terms on them. Now, let's look at diminishing returns in a Lagos bakery. I'm not sure whether many ladies are into baking because it involves some wahala and patience. But most of us, most of the time, we buy bread off the shelf or in the supermarket. So, but if you are used to bread production in a proper bakery, bakery has moved from where they used to use charcoal and stick to bake bread to proper electric ovens. And so the level of well, I'm very sure at some point some of us have eaten agege bread. I know that there's a lot of what's it called? There's this chemical that makes it to rise a lot. Sometimes it is so white, but if it is very, very hot and you put butter inside, you will probably enjoy it more than if you are eating sliced bread purchased from elite supermarkets like ShopRite and Spar. Let us assume you have bakers. You have 6, and you have ovens, which is a fixed production entity. Let us assume that for 1 baker, you have 2 ovens, you have 2 ovens here. And then for 6 bakers, you also have the same ovens. So the total bread loaves, that your total production, if you have 1 baker to 2 ovens, you'll be making 50. So let us go down. If you have 6 bakers, 2 ovens, you're making 250. If you have 5, you're making 240. If you have 4, you're making 220. Now, if you look at the effectiveness of the bakers employed, you discover that if you have 6, you have 2 ovens, and then you are still making about 230. There's a decline here. Then the rate of increase from 4, where you have 4 bakers, to where you have 5 bakers is probably 20. Where you have 3 to 4 bakers, the difference is about 60. So you have So the best rate of return is when you have 1 baker to 2 ovens, compared to where you have 2 bakers to 2 ovens. The increase between 1 and 2 will give you, that's about 70. So effectively, if you have 2 bakers to 2 ovens, I think this is a probably more effective level of output. I think where you have 2 bakers compared to. So your marginal product here is 70. When you get to the bottom, where you have 6 bakers, effectively it reduces to -10. So the production stage here, in stage 1, you are increasing. Stage 2, you are increasing. Stage 2, you are diminishing. Stage 2, diminishing. Stage 2, where this is the peak, where you have 5 bakers, and then in stage 3, it becomes negative. Now, this is just a very simple example. I will send this slide to you so you can study it properly. If you had done this in class, it would have made more sense. We'll have done it a lot on this and explain it properly. But it's very easy to understand. It's not difficult to understand. Now let's look at long-run production, planning horizons, variable capital, and long-run cost curves. Now for long-run production dynamics, you have your Q into your FAL into your AK. Now, where all factors are variable, planning horizon, if you are planning for the short run, you are not planning for too long a time. But in the long run, you're planning for, probably maybe 3 years, let us say maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. In the long run, farms can expand, for example, plant size. They can acquire new land. They can adopt advanced technology and reconfigure all inputs. Then the scale of factors, which measures proportional expansion across labor and capital simultaneously. No fixed costs. All costs become variable in the long run context. Now, this is the long run average cost curve. You have economies of scale and diseconomies of scale here. Now, this is where you have your output scale and your cost per unit. Now, understanding this concept, the long run average cost curve is formed as an employee of short run, as an envelope of short run average cost. Now, you have the falling phase, you have the minimum efficient scale, and then you have the rising phase. This is where you have, it rises from here. Look at this graph very well. It rises from the top here, moves down a little bit. This is the point of tangency. And then from there, it moves up again. This is where you have the diseconomies of scale. Now, if you look at where it rose from, it's not as high from where as it is rising. Okay, by the time we have figure to experiment or what's it called, explain this, you see that the point of rising here is is a bit more compared to when it fell, where you have these like this point of tangency, and then to the point where it rose again. Now you have the falling phase. This is driven by economies of scale per unit cost, which in other words, your minimum efficient scale gives you the lowest production point, achieving maximal cost efficiency. The rising phase driven by diseconomies of scale. I'm very sure when we were doing our O-level, these things are some of the things we had done in the secondary school, but because they have to be taught, they have to be brought into, because this is principles of microeconomics. Here we are looking at the principles. If you are doing economics in year 3, at that point we'll be looking at microeconomics theory improper. at that point, we'll be looking at something a lot more advanced than what we are doing at this point. Now, let us look at sources of economies of scale. You have technical economies, purchasing economies, financial economies. For technical economies, using large-scale automated machinery, specialized production lines, and continuous process refining. Dangote refinery is a very, very good example, a classical example. Please don't write on the slide. So somebody is writing on the slide. Please stop it. You have purchasing economies, bulk buying discounts on raw materials. For example, let us use the Yamura, for example. The Yamura does not buy things from does not buy pepper from those men selling pepper for maybe 100 naira, 200 naira on their shelves. I think she buys from my 12. She buys from those guys that bring in pepper from the north in bulk. And I'm very sure she has customers. She has good customers over the years. And to some extent, she can get bulk purchases and get discounts. And in fact, she can get bulk purchases on credit. Perhaps she can buy maybe 3, 4, 5 bags of pepper this week and pay back the following week. So those are purchasing economies. And then you have financial economies. Access to large corporate credit, lower interest bank loans, and international bond markets. For those of you, well, I do not, because we have limited time for this lecture, so I do not want to go too deep. If you go to the bank as a business, if you go to the bank to borrow money, you pay interest. But let us, I don't know, I think the interest rate is hovering around maybe 27, 28% per annum if you want to borrow money from the bank. But if you go to the Nigerian Stock Exchange to borrow money from the public, that is, you want them to come and invest in your business, you won't pay interest on the money that will be given to you by the public. I'm using what's it called? A layman's language now. But at the end of the year, at the end of every financial year, you must pay them dividend. In other words, they have invested in your business. You must give them what is known as return on investment. You must give, at least if they are giving you money, you must pay them something. And then they will be there for the long run. So anyway, by the time you do your IP, that is initial public offer, after some months, the shares can be sold on the secondary market. So at that point, they are free to either sell or retain the shares that they have sold into your business. This is known as financial economies. For large companies, let us use Dangote, for example. If Dangote is borrowing money from Access Bank, First Bank, of course, the man can negotiate very, very hard. If others are paying 28%, 27% interest, he might say, no, I want to pay 10%. But these banks, they know that if they have given the man maybe $10 billion and he's paying them 10% on that, it's not only the 10% that they will have access to. There are a lot of things that are attached to the money that is given to that business that they will benefit from. Now let's look at these economies of scale. These economies of scale, where you have operational bottlenecks, and then you dovetail to management and supervision. When a company grows too large, unit production costs begin to rise due to structural frictions. Sometimes you have bureaucratic red tape, communication breakdown. If a business is very, very big, the level of, well, if you go to the ministries, for example, that's a very classical example. If you go to the ministries, we are still, well, there's this talk that the civil service in Nigeria should be automated a lot more. Not that, so that people will not just be pushing files here and there. You have too much paper trail, and the level of decision making is slow. But if things are automated, in the morning as a staff or as a civil servant, all you need to do is just open your email, read the emails, and then you start to respond immediately. Rather than be writing letter, you give it to a typist to type for you, and then it moves from one table to another, and then somebody will be withholding his or her signature. So you have operational bottlenecks. And then you also have communication breakdown. That is information distortion across dispersed operational units. For management and supervision, the principal agent alignment challenges average mega corporations. You have the principal agent issues, and then you have labor frictions. Difficulty in monitoring workers' productivity in sprawling operations. And then the labor frictions involves alienation among large workforces, leading to lower morale. Now, that is one of the problems of very, very large organizations. I just pray that, for example, Dangote does not fall into that trap, because if you have entered that place of recent, you know that that is a huge enterprise. Now, let's look at Nigerian case studies. We have looked at Yamoria, for example. We have looked at that Taylor, at Yaba Tejusho, and let's look at maybe one or two more before we close for the day. You have this rice farmer in Kebbi. I'm very sure many of you are familiar with this lag rice, this Lagos rice. Lagos has a rice mill. I think it's somewhere in Imota or Ipota. I think it's Imota. Lagos is small. Lagos does not, they do not have the rice, they do not have the land to grow so much rice that will feed the population in Lagos. But there are rice farmers in Kebbi. So there's a link, or there's a cooperation between the Lagos state government and the Kebbi state government, where they have a cluster of rice farmers that grow rice for the rice mill at Imota. Now, let's drill down a little bit. Rice farming initiatives in Kebbi state showcases shifts in technological production functions. Introducing modern tractors, combined harvesters, and mechanized irrigation shifts the total production function upward, yielding substantially higher output per hectare of land. So the farmers in Kebbi that grow rice for the Lagos state government, the lag rice, they are not subsistence farmers. The cooperation between the Kebbi state government and Lagos state government is such that they provide these farmers with machineries to till the ground and machineries for the harvesting of the rice. And then midway, they also have machineries that help them to spray, I would say, herbicides to ward off I think the enemy of rice. There are some wicked birds. When they patch on a rice farm, they can eat and eat and eat and eat it down. So here, looking at the case study of the rice farmers in Kebbi and the Lagos State rice mill at Imota, this is a very, very good example of a technological shift when it comes to what the use of labor under production theory. Now let's look at Dangote Cement. We are looking at industrial economies of scale here. Dangote Cement is massive. If you have on your way to Abuja, I think, yes, you pass by the Bajana cement factory. I've not been inside before, but I think when we are passing, you can see it from the road, and I think we do pass by the fence. So I know, well, it's a bit sizable. It's not as if it's overly big like that compared to the Dangote refinery in Lagos. Now it's a manufacturing plant. And then here you can look at what extreme internal economies of scale. You can look at the technical efficiency, the bulk distribution, and then the market dominance. That cement factory, I think it was constructed by the Chinese, and which I believe they use one of the latest technology manufacturing, the what's it called, the plants. And then you have bulk distribution. You have captive fleet logistics, which costs across transport overhead. Dangote has, for each of these cement plants, I don't know how many trailers that service each of these cement plants, but there are a lot. So, well, if the railways were working, probably would have used the railways, but the railway itself is capital intensive. Probably that was why he jettisoned that idea. Rather than using railway, he decided to be using haulage, using his own trailers. And then they have these humongous, what's it called, distribution haulage business. Companies like Lafarge cannot even compete with him when it comes to distribution of his cement. And then you have the market dominance. You have lowest average unit costs, which allow competitive domestic pricing. Dangote Cement is the biggest player in the cement market in the country. We all know that. I think it's followed by I think Boa, followed by Lafarge. I know Lafarge is that is the initially that it used to be called Ewekoro Cement Factory. And then we all know that business had been there for many, many years. And then Dangote met them, bypassed them, and is now dominant in the industry in the country. In that case, because of his low production cost, is able to probably challenge any one of them that wants to compete in terms of pricing, because it has probably the lowest average unit cost in terms of production. Let's look at fintech, digital production. The Nigerian digital payment platforms like Paystack exemplify modern software production economies. You have high fixed capital, zero marginal cost, massive scaling. I'm very sure a lot of people in your class have what's it called? If you don't have money points, you will have what is it called again now?
Pampe.
God bless you, my brother.
I'm Pampe.
I'm Pampe. God bless you. Thank you very much. These digital companies, they do not have this is like Zenith, First Bank. Hello. I'm enjoying us for 3 o'clock. And this is just 2:44. I think I'll round up very shortly. So you have now zero marginal cost. They do not have a fixed mortar in terms of so much branches around. I think this Pampe, I think they just have maybe one headquarters somewhere. I think probably in Ikoyi. But they have highly skilled guys that work for them. These guys are talented in engineering, security compliance, and server setup. And then serving an extra 100,000 transactions cost virtually nothing. For example, you don't need to go to the office to open an account. You can go online and open your account using your phone number. There's a lot to say here, but because of time, your class rep has told me that you have another class very, very shortly. And then we can also look at the oil and gas refining limits, fixed capital bottlenecks here. NNPC refinery operations demonstrate rigid short-run fixed input constraints. Aging pipeline infrastructure, fixed refining capacity restricts output despite high crude oil input supply, underscoring the fixed vital role of capital turnaround maintenance. Don't let us go there at all. NNPC, the refineries are not working, and we know why they are not working. Let us even leave the corruption. They are aging pipelines where people can go there, puncture and steal crude. They have done turnaround maintenance repeatedly. At the end of the day, the refineries are not working. If we have maybe a physical class, we can delve more into this. And I'm very sure you know what I'm talking about. So, if you have questions, you can ask me. How can Nigerian SMEs successfully overcome short-run fixed input constraints? For example, power deficits, limited capital to achieve long-run scale expansions. If you have questions, you can ask me. Feel free to ask questions, maybe in the next, maybe 2-3 minutes. Your class rep has told me that there's another class by 3 in the next 30 minutes, thereabout. In the absence of any other question, I think we can call it a day, so that when we meet physically, we can demonstrate this with figures and calculations and see how they pan out in practice. Any question, please? On that note, I want to call this lecture, I want to bring this lecture to an end. And I wish you a lovely and pleasant weekend. Thank you very much.